Okay, and I think we are ready to begin. So let me share my
Awesome. Are you
screen.
going to share your screen? Yeah,
Yes,
perfect.
I'll share
Thank
my
you.
screen. And let me put you in presenter mode, Bonnie. Okay.
All right, perfect. Let me just get my, all right, got it. All right, well, thank you guys for coming. Welcome. We're so happy to have you join us for this, even though we're still talking about the effects of everything from the winter storm. It's already time to talk about summer garden maintenance, which is just feels crazy. It feels like, you know, the seasons are like all getting together and trying to figure out which can be meaner to us right now. But it is really nice right now to see the green and everything sprouting back and all the wildflowers, really the things that didn't get harmed by the storm. There's a lot to be thankful for. So just to start out, before we introduce ourselves, you know, letting you know that this program is presented by the Eden Lab at UT. So this is actually new name, but the same great people behind everything. So we're so happy to like keep presenting these different things for you guys. Eden, our new name stands for Education, Evaluation, and Nutrition. So a lot of you know us from Texas Sprouts, which was a research program that we worked on with Dr. Jamie Davis at UT, where we were researching about how school gardens affect obesity measures in elementary age kids. We all, right now, that Texas Sprouts research program is over and a lot of data analysis is going on. But since then, we now have two new programs. One of them, some of you are familiar with, is called Sprouting Teachers. And that provides free coaching to teachers and garden leadership teams that have school gardens. And our other one is called the Outdoor Intern Program. And that pairs UT nutrition undergrads with school teachers to offer gardening and nutrition lessons taught at your school. So we're going to talk more about those programs at the end, just to give you a sense, because the application window is open right now. But one of the other things we do to support school gardens is hold these webinars throughout the year. So we've done a couple of different ones. We had one at the beginning of last year that was about jumpstarting your school garden to start the year off. We've talked about sustainability, best practices, garden leadership, team effectiveness. So our goal is to keep kind of offering these. And if you have suggestions for topics, feel free to throw them in the chat. So just a couple of housekeeping things, as is typical with the Zooms, you have to start with this. So if you'll please mute yourself, just so we don't have any background noise. If you have a question, we are looking at the chat box, so we'll be monitoring that, and we can, the speaker can either kind of stop and answer something if it's timely, or we'll kind of go back and check them periodically. We are going to be offering CPE credit for this. So if you're, in order to get the CPE credit, you have to not only attend the webinar, but also participate in the activities. We're going to have some breakout rooms that we'll explain about a little bit later, but we'll send out the certificates afterwards. And our UT programs, you might have gotten some communications about those last week. And so if we have questions about those, then, you know, please contact us directly so we can have some direct conversations with you. But like I said, we'll talk about those programs in a little bit. All right, so first thing is just to introduce ourselves. So I'm just going to start, and just to make it fun, I want our presenters to introduce themselves and also talk about what is the worst habit you've picked up during the pandemic. So just starting out, my name is Bonnie Martin, and I lead the team that does Sprouting Teachers. I also worked on Texas Sprouts for a number of years, where I did a lot of the design work and the build day logistics for those gardens. I've been working about 20 years in school gardens, involving in the design, consulting, coaching, and just generally having a blast doing it. So I really enjoy working with schools. So my worst habit right now, a couple of you guys know that I've got both my kids at home, both teenagers. And really, there just tends to be like very little, there's very little respect for each other's space. And I find that my worst habit is that I just walk in on my kids constantly when they're in class, because there's something on my mind and I need to tell them, or I need to order them to do something. And I'm sure all you teachers are just like shaking your heads, like, really, you're that mother? Yes, I am. I accidentally walk in class all the time, and I get a lot of like quick like muting of the class and then yelling at me to get out of the room. Valerie, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Valerie Cordes. I am a special ed teacher. I've been teaching special ed for about 20 years, and now I'm transitioning over. I've been a gardener for a long time and started some school gardens at charter schools that I've taught at. And let's see, the worst habit that well, it might not be the worst. The worst one that I'm going to share with you that from this past year is that now, because I work all online, I am usually suitably professionally dressed only from the waist up. I go around with cutoffs and Crocs the rest of the time. So I never stand up on camera, and no one has ever caught me so far. So keep your fingers crossed, because it's a bad combo. Bad combo.
That's awesome. I'm Michelle Hockey Cooper. I know some of you from Texas Sprouts, and in the last couple of years, I've kind of transitioned into faculty at UT. So I teach a couple of classes in the nutrition department, and one of the classes that I teach, Nutrition 365, is kind of the impetus for the outdoor intern program. So I direct that program. I'm the co-creator, the director, and the only staff person for that program. But I'll tell you more about it at the end, but we place UT undergraduate students in your school gardens to teach garden and cooking and nutrition-based lessons. So I teach, and I love to teach little kids, which I used to do at Texas Sprouts, but I don't do that anymore. Just big kids. Mm-hmm. And my worst habit, Valerie, you actually stole mine, except mine is maybe even a little worse because I have a 14-month-old son. And our morning routine consists of like getting up together, reading books, eating breakfast, playtime, and getting dressed. Just at all doesn't factor into that. So I am notorious for like hopping on office hours with my students at 10:30, 11 o'clock, and both me and my son are on camera still basically in our pajamas, which is like, a t-shirt, so it's not terrible, but it's definitely the worst habit I've picked up. It's just like late start to the day professionally as far as my dress goes. But I am wearing a nice top and real pants right now. So
yeah, I was noticing that cardigan. I'm like, now you're bringing your A game today, girl.
Sure am. You guys are special.
All right, well, let's get started. So, we wanted to start with just talking about planning. We are going to be talking about summer options in your garden, but really we always like to stress planning. And any of you that have worked with us, with your garden leadership teams, or even, just individual teachers, we talk a lot about getting it into your plans, having it somewhere where you're not going to forget about it. So if your school has not done any overall garden planning, we just want to say how important that is. This is a great first step to think about seasonality and how to take care of it. But having that overall plan is so important. So I just want to kind of throw out something to you guys. Consider right now who you would go to ask questions about your garden. If that list of people is one person long, then you probably have a sustainability issue with your school garden. So if you have a school garden, you really need to have oversight from a group of people. And that group may include teachers, it may include admin, it may include parents, community volunteers. You may even have a school that is, pays someone like a garden coordinator, or has a teacher who does that part-time, some type of a manager, maybe it's a parent or something like that. But it should definitely be more than one person. And I know we talk about this a lot, but I can tell you at least one example this year that has already happened where we have, one person and that person is leaving. And so that's just a really critical thing. So along with maintenance plans, think about sustainability planning for your garden. And when you make these plans for summer, for fall, anything like that, have a place where you're storing that intelligence that you're gathering, whether it's on a Google Drive or just, a paper file or something, so that people in the future, your group in the future, can go back and you don't have to kind of like relearn this again next summer. All right, let's get into it. So we're going to talk about our garden summer care options. And the way we wanted to present this is to basically show you kind of models, not to like throw a whole bunch of like details at you, but to say, hey, here are like 3 different paths that you can basically take to take care of your school garden over the summer. So let's look at what those are. The first option, put it to bed, right? Is you decide, you know what, we just don't want to have to deal with it over the summer. We're going to actually just, we don't want to have volunteers up here. And so you take, that's probably the easiest path. Second one is keep it going, but you're going to have minimal support. So a smaller team. Third one is keep it going, but you've got a really big group that you can depend on. And then our last thing that we're going to talk about is, because it's really, really important, is that once you get to the end of the summer, you really do have to kind of jumpstart your garden again for the school year coming up to make sure when the kids come back, it looks really great. So that's what we're going to talk about at the end. All right, so I'm going to start out with putting it to bed. I get the easy one. So this is for those of you guys who are like, you know what, summer is here and I am not hanging out in the hot garden, and that's totally fine. So a couple of things that you're going to be doing if you're interested in just putting your garden to bed. It's not as easy as just walking away. Please don't do that, because you will not be a happy camper at the end of the summer. So the first thing is clean out all your annuals. And I would really say, because I know we were talking about kind of freeze damage and stuff like that, but like, anything that's just not looking good at the end of the school year, don't think that it's going to look better by the time you come back. Just go ahead and pull that stuff out. Any kind of annuals or vegetables that aren't looking good. If you still have like radishes growing in May that should have been harvested in February, go ahead and pull those out and just kind of clean out the soil. You also want to, for your perennials that are still alive, just give them a little bit of a pruning. So especially if it's brown, if you have sections that are like brown branches, here's a little secret. They're not going to turn green. So just go ahead and cut those off, start trimming them back. But if you have some really nice perennials that are like leafing out and everything like that, if you give them a little bit of a pruning, little shearing, light shearing right before the summer, it's going to encourage them to have some growth and have some blooms. And it stops them from being too leggy. Any of that kind of stuff that as long as it's, disease free and everything, if you have a compost pile, you can go ahead and throw those in the compost pile. If you want to have at the end of the year, your kids want to have like a shredding party and you're like shredding things like a lot of paper, that's a great thing to add into the compost pile too. So after you've kind of cleaned up everything, you want to make sure that if you have some empty beds, like vegetable beds that you're not planting anything, you can go ahead and do some digging. Let the kids on those days at the end of school where stuff maybe isn't as busy, let them kind of get into there and turn over the soil. That helps to stop having a lot of the compaction that can happen in the summer when there's not enough moisture and there's not a lot of things growing in there. It also can help expose some of the insects that like maybe they have eggs or things in the soil. So if you turn that over, it exposes them a little bit and maybe the birds can have a nice snack on them. So your soil's fluffier now, your stuff is kind of trimmed back. Now you want to really focus on the weeds. Weed really well. So I know a lot of times, a lot of us will take like a class out to weed and the kids are just pulling as fast as possible and they're leaving the roots. So try to work with the kids to show them how to really take care to get the roots out. Because if the roots are staying in, your weeding isn't going to really count for a lot and those are all going to come back. But if you're putting your garden to bed, weeding is a very, very big emphasis right now. And then the final step that you're going to take if you're putting your garden to bed is if you have beds where you don't have anything growing in it, or even where you have some perennials, go ahead and add 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch. That's going to help retain some of the moisture. It's going to help give some protection for the roots to keep them a little bit cooler. And it's going to reduce, but it's not going to eliminate, but just reduce the amount of weeds that are coming up. So adding that final layer of mulch will really help in the summer. So we get this question a lot when, we talk about kind of taking the easy road for the garden. People will say, well, I've heard that planting a cover crop would be really good. What do you think about that? So, I think people, when they have envisioned they're doing a cover crop, they're envisioning like scattering seeds, like in the beautiful soft soil, and they're floating out in the air and they just land and like they come back like a month later and there's like a gorgeous field of almost wheat-like plants blowing in the air. And that's not really how it goes. So Cover crops may be an option, but just we want to walk you through sort of the pros and the cons of it. So the reality is that yes, cover crops can help build nutrition in your soil. Some cover crops, depending on what you select, can actually help fix nitrogen in the soil. And so that's a really positive thing for your soil. And yes, they can help reduce weeds by effectively competing with them. So if your cover crop is very healthy and has very healthy roots, then weeds are not going to grow as well in that soil because they just don't have the space and they're not getting as much water. And yes, cover crops can also keep your soil looser by having roots constantly working their way through it. But here's the flip side of cover crops. They are not labor-free. So the garden has to be weeded before you seed the cover crop. The seeds of the cover crop, once you put them in, have to be watered pretty faithfully in order to get them to germinate and also to keep it growing strong. So there's not really that sense of being able to like put your garden to bed and walk away. If you're doing a cover crop, you are growing something in your garden that's going to need water. And then the final step with cover crops is that somebody has to come back, and before those cover crops start seeding out, they need to either go in and actually till them into the soil to get the benefits from that being in the soil and decomposing, or actually pulling them and then leaving them as mulch. So if everything is ignored until that goes to seed, you're going to constantly have that cover crop coming back. And when you're trying to grow regular crops, you're going to wonder why there's so much else that's coming up in your beds. And that's because the cover crop seeded out. So just know that if you're going that direction, make a really good decision on it.
Okay, I'm next with keeping it going with minimal support. The first part of this slide is everything that Bonnie went through on getting your garden ready for the summer would go for this group as well. You're gonna weed, you're gonna prune, you're gonna put down mulch where it's needed. This is more like deciding like, do I want to do this, or do I want to do this community support, or do I just want to put it to bed? So if you think you can want to do it with minimal community support, and I usually think of this as for the love of tomatoes, because if you want to get in there and you want to see those tomatoes and peppers go, and you love you love the garden, maybe you don't have space at home, or or this one is already done and beautiful, absolutely go ahead, keep it going. Plant a bunch of tomatoes if you need to in April, but not from seed. So what if you want to keep it going with minimal support, what you really need is like your solid group of 4 or 5 people. This might be your garden leadership committee or just real garden zealots that you have at school. That's who you want to start with, because you want people familiar with the garden. That way you don't have to put together a huge sheet of instructions on how to do it. And you don't need to train people. This is how you turn off the water. This is how you turn on the water. This is how you weed. So if you've got that 4 or 5 core group that is ready to go, you don't have to split the tomatoes quite as much when you only have a few people. So that's all the good stuff, and that's what if you have that group, this is a perfect way to go. And also then you can you can figure out who's on vacation when, so you don't have to do the whole garden the whole time. So the benefits of this is you get to enjoy the productive garden. You still get the garden experience. It's not at your house. Some people are going to be taking care of it at other times, so you don't have the responsibility the whole summer. And then, so yeah, and also you don't have to train people. You bring people in from the community. Super fun. Like the Girl Scouts come in, the Boy Scouts, and people from the church, and all that. And that's super fun. It's great to share with the community, but that's also work. It's a lot of planning, a lot of instruction and sheets and pictures and graphics and reminders. So there is, someone gets relieved of that burden. So the downside, the cost is there's more work because there's a fewer amount of people. Easy. You don't involve your community, which is fun sometimes, and you don't have those big work days where like a whole bunch gets accomplished, where you get there, everyone gets there at 8, and you leave by noon, and you go, wow, that looks great. So you don't have the opportunity to do that, but it's also just sort of a lot less just community organizing. Oh, and the storm's there. Stay inside, everyone. So how do you set that up for success? Meet with your whole group. before June, because it's only 4 or 5 people. Hopefully that's not too bad, but you know, I'm a teacher too. I know what your after school schedules look like. Start planning that meeting now, so to find a time when everyone can be there. You just want to create a schedule, you know, some kind of like Google schedule. Who's gonna take care of it when, who's on vacation, and put that, you know, put everyone on that schedule so you know when to see it. Probably want to send out reminders to people just in case summer gets busy. Your mind goes far away from school. So you get a reminder maybe the week before. Like, hey, you're gonna be in charge of the garden next week. You need to decide on that one point person who's gonna be there for emergencies. Things happen. Floods, someone breaks into the sheds, you know, weird things happen when everyone's away. So decide on that one person. Everybody gets, you know, everyone gets their phone number. It's on the top of the contact sheet. That would be great. And then you usually want to have a little bit of oversight. Maybe someone comes out every other week just to peek around and see. Usually that's the same person. That's the emergency contact person. But someone in charge is a good thing. So those are the basics of what you want to do with minimal support. It's a great way to go, keeps the garden going, and it's fun. And you don't have all the responsibilities of a home garden.
All right, so the last option we're going to present is basically how to keep the garden going. So again, you know, getting the benefit of all those vegetables and having that garden to use, but by engaging the community. So rather than doing it with a small group, as Valerie just explained, just engaging a bunch of different stakeholders to help kind of adopt the garden. So the goal with this model is to assemble that big team of caretakers so that you guys can all share the labor of maintaining the garden over the hot Texas summer, but also so you can share the harvest and kind of contribute to that, that feeling of community and of sharing around the school. The ideal with this model is that each caretaker or group, if you're talking with families, would be responsible for only 1 to 2 weeks during the summer. So it's really kind of an adoption model that a family or a person would come in and every other day for 2 weeks, the garden is kind of their responsibility, and that's the only commitment that they would have. So that's ideal if you have a group that's big enough to distribute the labor that much. So how do you assemble this group? Well, it's really easy to start reaching out to school staff and their families to see if any of the teachers or staff members or administrators want to partake in this community effort. And then you can start reaching out to student families as well as neighbors that live by the school or local community groups like churches or scouts groups, just to see what the interest is in helping adopt the garden over the summer and what people are willing to do as far as care and sharing that labor. I know one of our teachers who did this kind of model at his school in South Austin went to the pre-K graduation ceremony and got the entire summer planned out with just pre-K families, which was really smart because those families are going to be at that school for the next 5 years. So that was very, very clever and a great way to engage student families right early on in the beginning. So the benefit of this model, as I mentioned, is that you get that community buy-in, you get that long-term support of the school garden, and you get to share food with everybody, and the school can kind of be a center for that. And then the cost of this model is that it does take some work to train, well, first to recruit the team, then to train the team, and then also to just make sure that there is oversight around the garden and that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing and not doing what they're not supposed to be doing, like pulling a tomato plant out because they think it's a weed or something like that. So how do you go about managing this work? Well, the first step after you recruit your team is to host a training session where you show everyone, this is how you water, you know, like down to the basics, like this is how you open the shed. This is how you turn on the water. Some schools have that kind of crossbar shaped watering key. Like you need this key, it's in the shed to turn on the water. Where is the spigot located? How do you have to hook up the hose before you water? Do you need to unhook it when you're done? There's lots of little kind of tasks around watering that if you've done it a lot, you don't think about, but for new people, they would probably need some help and training. If you don't want to have a live training session, a really great idea is to share a video, just create a short step-by-step video walking people through the process, or even an instruction sheet like a PDF sheet, and then share that widely with your whole summer team so that you don't have to have multiple training sessions or try to organize everybody around kind of one time when they can come and be trained. And then just reminder to make your life easy, create one version of the instructions and kind of one draft version of all of the reminders. Hey, it's your turn to water. Don't forget you're coming to the garden next week. And then you can just copy and paste to every new caretaker who comes on, and you don't have to recreate the wheel every time you're introducing someone new to the garden. So after you kind of have your crew gathered and trained up, then you'll create a monthly schedule for each month of the summer and share that openly with kind of open signups. So great ways to manage signups online that school gardens have had success with include Sign Up Genius. Rallyhood is another nice website you can use, or it's also an app. And then Google Sheets is a really easy one, just something that has open access so people can go on and sign up as they want to without having to email a point person every time they want to come to the garden. You can do a hard copy sign up, but then just remember that if a bunch of people sign up on a piece of paper, someone has to take all of those signatures and all of those emails and input them into a computer. And if you're filling up a whole summer calendar, that's a lot of work in itself, just transferring that information into an electronic version. One of the random benefits of COVID could be that a lot of these things have kind of moved online now. So hopefully everyone's familiar with using shared documents and sign up software now. And then when you make this schedule, this preliminary summer schedule, make sure that you have pre-selected a couple of work days so that people, when they're signing up, can see like, oh, this is a big community work day when a lot of people can come and get stuff done, and you can be socially distanced and masked and still feel very comfortable and safe working out in the garden on a larger work day. And we'll talk more about work days in just a minute, but make sure those are included on the schedule. And then the last thing is to have a reminder system. So this could be an email, or it could be calendar invites on a shared Google Calendar with kind of automatic reminders built into the event. It could be using software like Remind. So just make sure that you have some system in place to remind each new caretaker, hey, this is your 2-week chunk starting right now. Don't forget to go and water the garden and pull some weeds when you're there, and pick up some tomatoes too. So just kind of, these are the steps that you would take to assemble that team and get them all ready to help share the burden over the summer and also share the love of the harvest in the garden. And then kind of the last piece is that throughout the summer, there are things that need to be done by a slightly smaller group of people. So 1 or even 2 people would just need to oversee the garden, kind of similar to what Valerie explained. So every couple of weeks, just checking in on the garden, making sure things are getting enough water, making sure that weeds are being under control, and making sure that the vegetables that are supposed to be growing are still there and growing, that are supposed to last all summer long. And then these same people, kind of the main points of contact, would be planning work days to make sure that any major problems are taken care of. So you would decide on those dates and add them to your summer calendar early on. And then the planning of the actual workday should be pretty minimal as far as effort on the part of the planners. It's mostly just kind of organizing around the event. So inviting or involving community groups to share the labor. So again, reaching out to a local church or a fire station that's near your school, or a scouts group if you have older kids who are alumni of the school that want to come back and help. Just get a group involved, and that can really help spread the work around. And then there's a couple different models that you can run work days. You could do 1 or 2, physical days where people are present in the garden from 8 to 10 in the morning. And we say morning because it's hot, and that helps people not fade early. So 8 to 10 or even 7 to 9 in the morning, and you just knock out a bunch of work in a couple of hours. The other model is to have 1 week out of the summer that's like your work week. And during this week, all of the different caretaker groups who are helping throughout the summer will pick a 2-hour block, and they'll come and just like weed for 2 hours and just dedicate 2 hours in that week to getting it done. The results of a work week are not as like visible immediately because it takes time for everyone to come and do their part. But both of these models will get the job done really effectively. And I think the biggest thing that's helpful for planning a workday and for getting the word out is to make it fun. So give it a name or a theme. During the workday, do things like playing music and call out thank yous to volunteer groups, or have contests like who can pull out the biggest weed root, and like have a contest with a yardstick to help, any kids who are there measure their nutgrass roots that are all connected. So just find ways to make it fun for anyone who's participating, because garden work in Texas is hot in the summer. So we need to make it really enjoyable. And the last thing here is to, if possible, provide snacks and water. I know that some administrators have gotten into their own pocketbooks for this sometimes, just to provide, you know, pretzels and water, like something really basic, but just something as like a thank you and a little bit of sustenance to people who do show up to help, can really go a long way. So just a couple of things to keep in mind throughout the summer if you're going to think about using this model of keeping the garden going with the help of the community. So just a couple of tips for no matter what model you decide, if you want to put it to bed, if you want to keep it going with a small group or keep it going with a larger community, a really important first step to take when you're thinking about the summer garden is to make a sign for the entrance and very explicitly state whether you're trying to limit visitors. So, you know, sorry, the garden's closed for the summer. Can't wait to see you back in the fall. If you're putting it to bed, that would be a totally fine sign to put up. Or if you're trying to assemble a big community team, say, you know, we would love your help managing the garden. Please contact this main point of contact person at this email and they will get you trained up so you know how to help. So just kind of emphasize what you want the garden to be like in the community over the summer so that when people show up, they know kind of what the protocol is. And that sign should also have an emergency contact number. As Valerie said, you know, things happen, right? So sometimes sheds get broken into or a water pipe will break. Even in the summer, sometimes those PVC pipes can break because they're too hot. I know we've dealt with freezing pipes because of the cold, but it can happen in the summer too. You know, there's a rattlesnake skin that got found near the garden or in the garden. There's all kinds of things that could come up. So make sure that there's an emergency contact number on that sign so that people can call and say, hey, I noticed this was happening, just wanted to make you aware. And then make sure that if you have this sign created, it doesn't have to be fancy on like a piece of wood or something. It can just be a laminated piece of paper that you post in multiple places throughout the garden at all the entrance points or prominently on the shed. And then you might have to replace it once during the summer, depending on what the weather is like. But just advertise openly how you want that garden space to be managed by people who are in the community throughout the summer. And that's kind of the big presentation part of this webinar. It was short and sweet, but we are next going to break you into small groups. We're going to probably aim for 10 minutes or less, just depending on how your conversations go. And each of these small breakout rooms will be managed or kind of facilitated by either Bonnie or Valerie or myself. And I'm going to open up the breakout rooms and you get to choose your own. So you'll put yourself into whatever breakout room you want to go into. So the first one will be with Bonnie, and that's you can select this breakout room if you think that your school might want to put the garden to bed, or if you just have no idea what option is going to be best and you just want to ask questions and bounce ideas off of someone. That's going to be that first breakout room. The next one is going to be with Valerie, and that's just throwing out ideas for how to keep the garden going with a small group. And the last one will be with me, and that's how to keep the garden going with the support of the larger community. And the purpose of these breakout rooms is really just to throw out ideas for, is this the right model for my school? How do I get started? And then what questions do I have? So those are the three kind of big talking points we're going to go over in the groups. And your conversations might be short or they might be a little bit longer, but we'll kind of keep 10 minutes in mind as the goal here. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and I'm just going to open up these breakout rooms, and you should be able to choose your own based on the name of the room. And if you want to switch rooms in the middle, you can come back to the main session and then put yourself in a new room, or you might even be able to just hop to a different breakout room from the one that you're in. All right, so do you guys see these rooms? Okay, so go ahead and start pre-selecting, and then Bonnie and Valerie and I will join you when everyone's got a room.
I don't
Bonnie,
see
do you
it.
want to jump into your room?
I don't see it.
I don't see it.
Oh, wait, hold on. I just hit breakout rooms. I see.
Yeah, click breakout rooms and you should be able to see it. And if you don't see it, Diana, I can put you in a room too. Can you find it, Diana? Diana?
I'm here. It's not letting me press.
Which
I
one
was
would you like to go to? I can put you in.
I wanted to keep it going with minimal support. How do you get keys for your school? Like to let other people come? That's our problem, I think.
For
But
the school, for the garden.
uh-huh.
So a lot of schools will have a lockbox screwed onto the outside of the shed with a code, and then you share that code with your team, and then there's a key inside the lockbox.
Oh, okay.
That's what a lot of schools do who have multiple caretakers. That's a really
Okay.
good question, though.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll put you in that room.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, you should be able to join.